Immanuel Kant, 1724 to 1804, argued that we should not be overly captivated by science, since it does not reveal ultimate truth but merely provides practical benefits. Science, he maintained, must be applied in service to humanity, guided by morality and religion, with the collective consciousness of humankind as the standard of judgment. In response, philosophy adjusted its orientation, seeking solutions by emphasizing the capacity for critical thought while distancing itself from modernity through a rejection of logocentrism, a concept later articulated by Ludwig Klages, 1920, to characterize Western science. In this sense, philosophy resists the presuppositions that 1. All reality is conceived as being interconnected within a fixed system. 2. Human beings are believed capable of constructing objective truth within such a system. 3. It is assumed that humans can articulate knowledge within this networked system precisely as they envision it, using an idealized language. When the Pruitt-Igoe housing project in St. Louis, Missouri, 1954 to 1972, was demolished after its failure and abandonment, it left many people with a deep aversion to the square, uniform style of modernist residential buildings. This event became a pivotal moment, symbolizing the rise of a postmodern outlook within society. In reflecting on the intellectual movements that preceded the emergence of the postmodern paradigm, several influential currents of thought stand out, including the movement of skeptical doubt. This intellectual shift arose from the recognition that scientific truth does not guarantee universal certainty, leading instead to a reliance on networks of scientific knowledge. Werner Heisenberg, 1901 to 1976, introduced the uncertainty principle, destabilizing quantum theory by revealing that the seemingly fixed nature of particles, the presumed foundation of all matter, was in fact indeterminate, making precise prediction impossible. Frank Ramsey, 1903 to 1930, argued that probability reflects the degree of belief of a rational agent. No matter how high the probability appears, and even if it seems to approximate objective truth, it ultimately represents only a level of confidence in the available information. Edvard Westermark, 1862 to 1939, contended that ethics are culturally relative. Moral codes are not grounded in universal reason but arise from human emotions shaped by society. Ludwig Wittgenstein, 1889 to 1951, emphasized that language evolves alongside human consciousness. As a social phenomenon, ordinary language carries inherent meaning, and human knowledge is no more than a representation or picture of reality. And Friedrich Hegel, 1770 to 1831, maintained that what we regard as truth and reality corresponds to an overarching logical structure. Knowledge, therefore, is the self-expression of this logical network as it unfolds beyond individual thought. Deconstructionism movement. When the stability of the knowledge network is disrupted, the postmodern movement arises, marked by vivid and often radical critiques, including Friedrich Nietzsche, 1844 to 1900, argued that reality is not fixed or orderly but rather a blind force driven by the will to power. Universal truths are nothing more than statistical records, while the creation of rules represents human distortion and self-deception. Jean-Paul Sartre, 1905 to 1980, emphasized human freedom, insisting that individuals are wholly responsible for their actions. Michel Foucault, 1926 to 1984, contended that what society accepts as reality and truth is shaped by power relations. Intellectuals in each era articulate knowledge in ways that align with the interests of those in power who, in turn, support and legitimize them. Jacques Lacan, 1901 to 1981, suggested that to grasp meaning, one must first interrogate and dismantle the signifiers within language. Jacques Derrida, 1930 to 2004, proposed that the meaning of language is never fixed but endlessly deferred, a process he termed difference. Jean Baudrillard, 1929 to 2007, argued that modern technology enables infinite reproduction, producing a hyperreal society saturated with simulacra, where distinctions between reality and its representations collapse. Jean-François Lyotard, 1924 to 1998, advanced the idea that knowledge is legitimized through grand narratives, which themselves are unstable and provisional. He insisted that the most valuable knowledge today is temporary and continually revised. His book The Postmodern Condition, A Report on Knowledge, 1979, was the first to explicitly use postmodern in its title. Claude Lévi-Strauss, 1908 to 2009, maintained that myths and narratives reflect aspects of reality and must be interpreted through holistic and cross-cultural comparison. And Gilles Deleuze, 1925 to 1995, argued that identity is not a stable essence but the effect of difference. Reconstructionism movement. Negative criticism by itself does not provide new answers. It merely rejects the modern paradigm and destabilizes the established structure of knowledge. This produces a sense of uncertainty. Consequently, postmodern thought has developed a critical mind that seeks a middle path, applying knowledge to practical purposes while orienting it toward the achievement of meaningful life goals. Key contributions include Clifford Geertz, 1926 to 2006, argued that there is no universal human essence. Cultural universals, beliefs supposedly shared by all humans, cannot be demonstrated. Instead, what we find are cultural differences. Human free will and memory allow adaptation to environments, and these adaptive practices are collected, transmitted, and institutionalized through language and tradition, forming the culture of each society. Donald Davidson, 1917 to 2003, emphasized the holism of language. Sentences are composed of words, yet the meaning of words depends on their role within the total structure of use. Richard Rorty, 1931 to 2007, advanced a pragmatic approach. He rejected representationalism, the attempt to strip history from language, and instead called for a pragmatized culture, emphasizing naturalism, liberalism, and ethnocentrism. His concept of liberal irony affirmed commitment to liberal values without reliance on absolute truths, prioritizing solidarity over objectivity and viewing truth as what our peers allow us to affirm. Hilary Putnam, 1926 to 2016, proposed that the meaning of a word is determined by the objects it refers to, which are identified through rigid designators tied to the matter in question. Johnny Vadimo, 1936 to 2023, introduced the notion of weak thought, which resists strong metaphysical claims. He advocated a non-authoritarian hermeneutics open to reinterpretation and plural coexistence. The Vienna Circle shifted toward emphasizing critical thinking grounded in analysis, evaluation, and application. Heinrich Fries, 1911 to 1998, sought a principled compromise in fundamental theology, advocating a method of reread all, reject none. He distinguished between moderate and strong postmodernism, suggesting that moderate postmodernism remains non-foundational yet seeks to retain some rationality by critically engaging diverse thinkers, from Derrida and Foucault to Gadamer and Habermas. Evaldas Necrosis, 1945 to 2023, in Positivism, Post-Positivism and Postmodernism, 2005. highlighted the centrality of paradigm thinking. Drawing from Thomas Kuhn, postmodernist writings treat paradigms as interpretive frameworks, regarding Kuhn himself as a key precursor. This use of paradigm underscores the essentially interpretive nature of mind. Postmodernism, paradoxically, generates a metaparadigm that unites its diverse strands while simultaneously subverting all paradigms. E.K. et 2009 emphasized the shift in postmodern thought from life itself to the quality of life. Anung Wisdom, Tools for Postmodern Living, page 452. And K. Bunchua, 1929-2025, advanced the idea of authentic happiness according to reality, a life orientation that seeks authentic fulfillment grounded in both cultural heritage and the realities of change. In his editorial book, The Basis of Values in a Time of Change, Chinese and Western, Series 3, Asia, Volume 16 in 1999. Moderate postmodern philosophy. The first thought came with the word that was coined was reconstructionism in 1942. Later, Richard Mosier in his book, The Philosophy of Reconstructionism, 1951, pointed to the idea of reconstruction in logic, morality, education, and philosophy. The philosopher of education, Theodore Branmeld, 1904-1987, was at the forefront of this idea. Meanwhile, within the religious context, a creative adaptation of Judaism emerged, emphasizing the cultivation of Jewish traditions and ways of life. For Christians, the emphasis was on considering biblical law as the basis of state law and social morality, as well as accepting the revival of ancient religious beliefs and practices. Education has two major roles: to transmit culture and to modify culture. When American culture is in a state of crisis, the second of these roles, that of modifying and innovating, becomes more important. Reconstructionism, Branmeld affirmed, is a crisis philosophy. The Reconstructionist is very clear as to which road mankind should take, but he or she is not at all clear as to which road it will take. Branmeld, Theodore, page 75. Philosophically, Reconstructionism is a social movement that continually reinvents itself in order to create a more complete governance or social network. This ideology is based on a combination of contextual interpretations and the concepts associated with deconstruction, which suggests that systems or joints must be broken down into smaller, meaningful parts that are essential components for rebuilding the system from its initial, broken state. In art, the concept of reconstruction preceded the concept of deconstruction. There was an attempt to explain Reconstructionism as being the same as postmodern art, calling it reconstructivist art, which is described as Reconstruction art preceded the art and techniques of deconstruction, emphasizing the application of art to classical concepts and structures, with the aim of creating more expressive and distinctive works, while comfortably incorporating the vitality and originality of deconstruction into the work, as was the preference and trend of classicism. Reconstruction art aims to restore a sense of the real in a world where things present themselves as illusions. Deconstruction is a perspective that emphasizes a critique of the relationship between text and meaning. Jacques Derrida's 1967 work on grammatology, which presented the main tenets of the deconstruction, was influenced by Ferdinand de Saussure's idea of language as a system of signs and words, which have meaning only in the difference of the signs. Derrida argued that this concept is insufficient and does not deconstruct other opposites, nor can it stop people from moving away from nihilism and cynicism. Therefore, to effectively defend any meaning, the deconstruction must create new terms, not synthesizing opposites, but marking the difference and the role they can play in eternal interplay. Derrida's idea shows that there is a purely analytical necessity for the placement of the signs between words, in which Derrida calls this the unities of simulacrum, whereby the qualities of words that are not correct in both language and speech are not placed between philosophical opposites that are opposed and aimed at managing without emphasizing the creation of third term. This stance, known as postmodernism, emerged after World War II as a reaction to the perceived failings of modernism, including the art project which served the authoritarian rulers and the art to mainstream culture. This postmodern stance first emerged in the 1940s with the work of Jorge Luis Borges. However, scholars consider postmodernism to have its beginning in the 1950s and its heyday in the 1960s, with postmodernism becoming a dominant ideology in art, literature, film, music, theater, architecture, history, and continental philosophy. Postmodernism also played an iconic role in terms of form, reference, and narrative. Its metaphysical skepticism of the grand narratives of Western culture led to the fundamental questioning of reality, of what reality consists of and its effect on the mind, leading to its existence despite its endless reproduction. However, by the 1990s, postmodernism had begun to decline, and attempts continued to identify periods in history when it flourished and when it was considered non-mainstream. Heinrich Frei's book in 1985, Fundamental Theology, defined moderate postmodern as an attempt to apply some form of rationality, a specific critique of the real problems of history, a characteristic of assertion. The roots of moderate postmodern thought come from the philosophy of Heidegger and Wittgenstein. Moderate postmodernism emerged after the events of 9/11 in 2001. It is a stance that applies a pure philosophy of pragmatism to dealing with reality. It emphasizes learning, remembering, and applying it to create a better new situation. It is a learning from experience rather than a mere intellectual activity. This concept also believes in a utopian future for humanity if we learn to take action and change the right direction. It emphasizes action and initiating change, and laws must act as safeguards to encourage courage to overcome social constraints. It emphasizes weighing possible consequences, both good and bad, preventing side effects, and truly accepting the consequences of actions without complaint or for survival in advance. That is, it must also take full responsibility. Moderate postmodernism offers a nuanced path. It questions foundational assumptions while preserving a commitment to critical dialogue, pluralism, and ethical engagement. Key characteristics of moderate perspectives. 1. Epistemic humility, recognition of the limits of human knowledge without falling into total relativism. 2. Constructed truths, understanding truth as shaped by language, culture, and history. 3. Critique without rejection, engaging critically with science without discarding its value. 4. Ethical pluralism, welcoming multiple moral frameworks while fostering respectful dialogue. 5. Engagement with the marginalized, valuing voices often excluded from dominant discourses. Jean-Luc Nancy, 1940–2021, advanced the idea of being with, emphasizing existence as inherently relational, rejected strong ontological or political foundations in favor of openness and fragmentation. Charles Taylor, born in 1931, integrated hermeneutics, ethics, and multiculturalism to respond to identity conflicts in late modern societies. Advocated for a horizon of significance, grounding identity in shared meanings while respecting diversity. Richard J. Evans, born in 1947, innovation has come above all from historians writing about the marginal, the bizarre, The individual, the small scale. Extreme and moderate versions or aspects of postmodernism. David Nichol, B. 1952, give the phase, only moderate postmodernism can adequately reflect the postmodern spirit. The postmodern was coined into Thai word Lang Nava Yuk by Kirti Bunchua in 2004, a Royal Academician. The term postmodern and the paradigm concept came from Thomas Kuhn, 1922 to 1996, who said that paradigm reflects the belief that the mind's nature is essentially interpretative. Bunchua used the term postmodern paradigm in parallel with the ideas of Western philosophers who view postmodern as a paradigm, such as Richard Tarnas, 1993, Evaldas Nekrasa, 2005, etc. Moderate postmodernism bridges radical deconstruction and constructive critique, merge with postcolonial theory, feminist and queer theory, pragmatist education, digital humanities and cultural studies, that making it suitable for 1. Education systems seeking inclusivity without nihilism. 2. Ethics and politics in multicultural contexts. 3. Cross-cultural dialogue in global philosophy. Moderate postmodernism represents a critical yet constructive turn in Western philosophy and provides a framework for 1. Building cross-cultural coalitions, 2. Sustaining dialogue over domination, and 3. Replacing universal dogmas with locally informed ethics. It inherits the postmodern suspicion of power and meta-narratives but avoids the paralyzing relativism that often accompanies more extreme forms. By embracing pluralism, ethical responsibility, and epistemic humility, not restrict to the old framework, it offers a compelling vision for the future of thought in an increasingly interconnected world. These moderate postmodern, a kind of non-extremist, philosophical movements are not very numerous, but the power of this concept has been widely recognized in various religious groups and non-religious groups. The moderate postmodernists also showed themselves to be a group with higher moral standards both in terms of behavior, thought, and ethics.